Yai, lai, 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 lai,
Happy Passover, Chag Sameach, and welcome to the Temple Beth Zion recording of a Passover Seder. We hope you can use this to help celebrate Passover at this strange time where we are trying to be together while we are apart. We have our Passover Haggadah on the screen for you. We have Cantor Myers and Judy Henn creating Passover together. And we are going to start on page 2, sorry. And there it says page 2, we welcome the festival of Pesach as darkness descends. As we kindle these lights, we remember that our ancestors discovered freedom in the middle of the dark final night in Egypt. Let the candles we light be a reflection of the light that shines within each of us, and let that light radiate throughout our homes. We praise the source of light that keeps alive the hope of freedom amid the darkness of oppression. We light our candles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel yom tov.
Amen. And we continue with Shehachianu for the first night of Pesach.
Not only for the first night of Pesach, but for our first virtual Seder. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, eternal one, our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us life, kept us strong, and allowed us to reach this happy season.
Amen. And we continue with the chanting of the order of the Seder.
Kadesh urchatz karpaz yachatz magid rachza motzi matzah maror korech shulchan orech zafun boech halel nirtzah.
A chanting that reminds us that that was originally all that we got. The original Haggadah was just this list of things, and the chanting was the way we remembered it. All right, we continue on page 4, the introduction to the Seder.
We begin the Passover Seder, our journey from slavery to freedom, through word and song, story and practice, questions and more questions. We reimagine the story of our ancestors' exodus and liberation. We tell the story to preserve the memory and to evoke the experience. We tell the story because Egypt is more than a physical place, and the Exodus is more than a moment in time. When we recall the story of our oppression, we resolve to fight oppression everywhere. When we recall the story of our liberation, we renew our dreams for freedom everywhere. Tonight, we raise our voices as individuals and members of this Seder community, committed to marching together out of Egypt. And now, in front here, I have a Cup of water, Miriam's cup. Water is very much associated with Miriam for a number of reasons, because she watched over her brother Moses when he was placed in the Nile. She led the women in song after they came through the Sea of Reeds. And Midrash says that every place they stopped, when they were wandering in the wilderness, a well of water would appear. So we represent Miriam with a cup of water. Zot kos Miriam kos mayim chayim zecher litziat Mitzrayim. This is the cup of Miriam, a cup of living waters. Remember the exodus from Egypt.
And we know that we have lots of cups of wine or grape juice for this evening. So we continue with the Hebrew word kiddush, means sanctification. We do not sanctify the wine. The wine is the symbol of the sanctity, the preciousness, and the sweetness of this moment. Held together by sacred bonds of family, friendship, peoplehood, we share these tables tonight with one another and with all the generations who have come before us. We belong. And we belong to the generations who have come before us and those who will come after us, sharing this sacred story and celebration. Let us sanctify this singular moment. Tonight we will drink not one cup, but 4, representing steps in our ancestors' journey from oppression to liberation. We start with slavery, degradation, the narrow place of Egypt. Knowing how we were enslaved helps lead us to freedom. We drink this first cup in honor of awareness.
So if you have your glass full with wine, with yain, or with juice, the Hebrew word for that is meats, please fill your neighbor's cup. And our cups are filled as well. And hold it nice and high as I chant the kiddush without the Shabbat insertions, as our Seders are occurring in the middle of the week. Thusly, we don't recite the Shabbat Kiddush insertions. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol olam, v'romamanu mikol lashon, v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava, moadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason, et yom Chag hamatzot hazeh, zeman cherutenu mikra kodesh, zecher litiat mitzrayim, kivanu vacharta, veotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim. Umoadei kodshecha besimcha uvsason hinchaltanu baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
Mekadesh Yisrael behazmanim.
Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim tov Mashem HaKodesh Domain.
So, Cantor and Judy, before we move on to our first section, our symbolic hand washing, our urchatz, I was wondering if we wanted to do a quick run through of our symbols on the Seder plate. Cantor, you want to pick a symbol and explain?
I would love to. I don't know if you can see my Seder plate here.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. So as I was told from my husband, this karpas, I don't know if you can see it, very small. This actually was planted very early from my husband. And this is from our garden, which I picked just this morning, and it represents Aviv, springtime.
Wonderful. Judy, you want to pick a symbol and explain?
Okay, the birzah, the roasted egg, and I'm very proud of myself because I actually got it to look roasted. The egg is a symbol of life, and the Passover Seder, the whole holiday of Passover, represents the rebirth of a new life for the children of Israel as they moved from slavery into freedom. And so the egg is a symbol of life.
Wonderful. And a symbol of another holiday at this season for some reason or another. I have on my Seder plate a little maror, which is my favorite symbol because it goes so well with so many things. So the horseradish or the bitter herb, which is of course not supposed to be enjoyed. It's supposed to make us cry. It's supposed to make us feel the tears of bitterness and slavery. All right, moving right along. Cantor, you want to explain another symbol?
I would love to. So I'm going to point to it, but this is I don't know if you can see it. This is actually a roasted lamb shank bone.
Excellent.
That we got. And it's the reminder, it's the zarah, and it's the reminder of the sacrificial offerings and the blood that was painted on our doors so that the angel of death would bypass or pass over our homes during this season.
Seems like a good name for a holiday. Judy, you want to explain another symbol?
Sure. I'm going to go to my favorite, the charoset, which is, in our family anyway, a mixture of apples and nuts and cinnamon and a little ginger and, of course, some good old manischewitz. And it's chopped up finely, and it represents the mortar, the paste that held the bricks together when the children of Israel were building the walls and whatever they built as slaves for Pharaoh. But it's also very sweet. So my favorite, I guess, food of the whole Seder is the Hillel sandwich because it gives a juxtaposition of the sweet and the bitter. And I just happen to love charoset. We eat it all week long.
Wonderful. And that takes me to the orange, a strange symbol on the Seder plate. We have an orange on the Seder plate because of an apocryphal story that originally came from Susanna Heschel. And the story's gone through many manifestations, but the final one is that Susanna Heschel supposedly heard an Orthodox rabbi respond to a woman leading services as a rabbi that a woman belongs on the pulpit as a rabbi like an orange belongs on the Seder plate. And since we believe very strongly in the leadership of women and equality in our Reform and progressive Jewish communities, we put an orange on the Seder plate saying, yes, we all belong. We all have a right to lead. Have we missed anything? Just, I guess, the matzah, huh?
And salt water, but we'll get there.
Salt water, yes. So, Cantor Myers, you want to tell us about matzah?
Oh, well, okay. So, first of all of you watching this should know, and Rabbi Freirich and his family have been at my house for the Seder, that as this is the time of celebration our freedom, my home is very unfree. No, it's very free. It's very free. It's actually, we encourage people not to dress up and encourage people to be comfortable. So nothing like a good stomach discomfort with the wonderful bread of affliction. As I say, every year, nothing like a good few days of nothing but this, and you'll understand why this really is the bread of affliction. The matzah And we are very lucky to have technology and to have wheat matzah, high fiber matzah, everything matzah, egg matzah, whatever. So the matzah represents the bread of affliction. Why is it the bread of affliction? Because we did not have enough time when we were escaping from bondage for our bread to rise. Therefore, during this week of Pesach, we eat matzah. It's the bread of affliction, and it's also the bread of our freedom. And I don't know if you all know this, but in Israel, I've never been this serious, by the way, my Seder ever, but in Israel, you cannot buy matzah any other time of year, only at this time, only at Pesach. And so my parents like to go and visit Wegmans or Tops or Dashes and get a box of matzah in the middle of June. Can't do it in Israel. It's a mitzvah to eat matzah, and it's not the whole entire square that you should eat, but rather the rabbis tell us that you fulfilled the mitzvah of motzi matzah by just eating an olive-sized piece of matzah, and then you have fulfilled the mitzvah. It's considered kosher.
Okay, and that leads us to both the saltwater and urchatz and Judy. So we are in the middle of page 6.
Urchatz, symbolic hand washing, and we have certainly all been doing a lot of hand washing these days. So this is something that feels very familiar to us right now. It says, many waters flow through the Passover tales. Moses in the bulrushes, the Nile turned to blood, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, and Miriam's well. Their waters are ours. Their rivers run into our cups. And for this first hand washing, there is no blessing for it, but let's do a symbolic air washing and get our hands nice and clean before we eat our karpas. Dipping a vegetable in salt water. So karpas represents the spring and the new growth, rebirth, and the beginning of new life. We taste in this fresh vegetable, here's my karpas right here. We taste in this fresh vegetable all the potential in nature and in ourselves. Tonight we celebrate our growth, the flowering of our spirit and of our voices. As spring reawakens all that is green, let us reawaken our ties to the natural world and our bonds to the earth as well. We dip the greens into the salt water, which represents the tears that the slaves shed while they were slaves in Egypt. And we acknowledge through our blessing that there is a creator and a purpose to the universe, that we are partners in the work of creation. So let's all take our karpas, dip it into a little salt water here, and say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari ha'adama, borei pari ha'adama. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth.
Yummy.
Now, we're going to break the middle matzah. So at the center of their table, there should be a plate for matzah. So my matzah cover here has 3 sections, and I'm going to take out the middle matzah. You're going to break it in 2, well, sort of in 2. So there's a larger piece and a smaller piece. The smaller piece you're going to put back between the other 2. And the larger piece gets wrapped in a napkin and it becomes the afikomen. So I have here a napkin, maybe not big enough for this piece of matzah. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so I wrapped the matzah in the napkin. The
Where are
hidden
you
matzah is called the afikomen, or dessert. It's a tradition that children search for this hidden matzah, and finding it, they ransom it back at the Seder's end. Otherwise, we know the Seder could go forever. So it's in dad's or whoever does the ransoming, it's in your best interest to give the kids something for the afikomen. We are free, but we remember when we were slaves. We are whole, but we bring to mind those who are broken. The middle matzah is broken, but it is the larger part which is hidden, since the future will be greater than the past, and tomorrow's Passover nobler than yesterday's Exodus. The prospects for our hope for future are overwhelming to the point of making us mute. So it is in silence, without blessing, that we break and hide the matzah and long for its recovery and our redemption.
So we are up to the telling of the story. The central imperative of the Seder is to tell the story. The Bible instructs, "You shall tell your child on that day, saying, 'This is because of what Adonai did for me when I came out of Egypt.'" We relate the story of our ancestors to regain their memories. As Elie Wiesel writes, God created humans because God loved stories. We each have a story to tell, a story of enslavement, struggle, and liberation. We must also tell our own stories at the Seder table, for Passover is more than a one-time event. Passover is a model for human experience in all generations. If you want to, you can uncover your matzah and hold it up if you like, and say, "Halachma anya di achalu avachtana ba'ara di Mitzrayim. Kol dichpin yete v'yechol. Kol ditzrich yete v'yifsach. Hata hacha l'shana haba'a ba'ara di Yisrael. Hata avde l'shana haba'a b'nei chorim." This is the bread of affliction which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate Passover. Today we are here, next year in the land of Israel. Today we are slaves, next year we will be free. And certainly on this Passover, we are also hoping for a little bit more freedom a little sooner for all of us, and praying for it as well.
Amen.
Amen.
Written in Aramaic, this statement begins the narration of the Seder by inviting the hungry to our table. According to Jewish legend, Aramaic is the one language which the angels do not understand. Why then is halachma in Aramaic? To teach us that where there is poverty, no one should rely upon angels. No one should pray to the heavens for help. We know the language of the poor, for we were poor in the land of Egypt. We know that we are called to feed the poor and to call them to join our celebration of freedom. And we continue. And again, the poverty in our hearts today is that we cannot invite people in to share our table tonight. And that is so difficult for all of us. And we are trying to figure out how to alleviate suffering while being distant. We continue with the 4 questions on the next page, page 9.
So between Rabbi Freirich and Judy, Henn, and myself, I am the youngest. And for many years, I had to recite these 4 questions. And I was looking for my little puppet so that I can act it out as much as I can. However, because we're recording this and I don't want to be too ungepachik, I won't, but I'll provide a very creative, explanation of what we're asking for tonight. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot, mikol halelot, shebechol halelot, anu ochlim chamet umatzah, chamet umatzah, halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. Halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. Shebecho halelot, אנו אוכלים שירקות, הלילה הזה, מרור, הלילה הזה, מרור. שבכל הלילות אין אנו מטבילין אפילו פעם אחת, הלילה הזה, שתי פעמים, הלילה הזה, שתי פעמים, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בין יושבים ובין מסובים, הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים, הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים. So, in short, why is this night different than all other nights? On all other nights we eat leavened or unleavened bread, but why on this night only do we eat matzah as opposed to our saltine crackers or French bread? On all other nights, we eat vegetables of all kinds, you know, our celery with our chicken wings and French fries, but why on this night are we only doing the maror, the bitter herbs? That was supposed to be like this, and if your allergies are blooming right now with everything else that's blooming, you are grateful. On all other nights, we dip our vegetables into our ketchup or our blue cheese or our ranch sauce just once. But why on this night? Why tonight do we dip twice? Sheteh pe'amim, that's 2 times. And on all other nights, this one is my favorite. Why do all of my manners at the table have to be intact? But on this night, I can recline, I can use pillows, I don't even have to be dressed up in my house for a Yom Tov, a Yontif dinner. So why on this night do we recline and eat at our leisure?
Excellent. And I imagine we will come upon the answers throughout the rest of the Seder.
Yes.
And
spoiler alert.
And anybody who has ever dealt with children, whether you've been a teacher or a parent or a sister or a brother or an aunt or an uncle, you know that different people learn in different ways. Everybody has their own learning style. And so the answers to those questions can be delivered in many different ways. On page 10, we're going to talk about 4 different kinds of children. In 4 different passages, the Bible commands that we instruct our children about the Exodus. That's the whole point of the Seder, after all, is to teach our children about the story of the Exodus. Why this repetition, asked the teachers of the tradition, and the rabbis answered, because there are different kinds of children. That is, that there are different kinds of people with different aptitudes and different attitudes. And so our tradition speaks of 4 types of children. One is wise, one is wicked, one is simple, and one does not know how to ask. The wise one asks, what is the meaning of the laws and traditions that God has commanded? We should teach her all the traditions of Passover, even to the last detail. The wicked one asks, what does this ritual mean to you? By using the expression to you, he excludes himself from his people. Shake his rebellion and say to him, it is because of what Adonai did for me when I came out of Egypt. For me and not for him. For had he been in Egypt, he would not have been freed. The simple one asks, what is all this? We should tell her, it was with a mighty hand that Adonai took us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And as for the one who does not know how to ask, we should open the discussion for him as it is written, and you shall explain to your child on that day, it is because of what Adonai did for me when I came out of Egypt. Look again at the 4 children. The simplicity of this account is very deceptive. What makes the wise one wise? And if she's wise, why does she focus on the minutiae? Who is this wicked one? Why is he even at the table instead of leaving home on Seder night? Why is the wicked one listed second and not last? Are all second children destined to ask challenging questions? My second one certainly did. What is his wickedness? Why does the text say that were he in Egypt, he would not have been freed? Is cynicism a form of slavery? What is the motivation for his cynicism? How do we suppose he became wicked? What turns children against the values of their parents? Is the simple one's simplicity a reflection of innocence and wonder, or indifference and apathy? Is there really ever such a thing as an innocent bystander in life? Can one claim to be an innocent bystander to poverty, war, slavery, genocide? Have we ever been the one who does not know how to ask? Have we ever been so thoroughly confused, baffled, or overwhelmed by life that we couldn't even form the question? Which one of these might be us now in our lives? Are we the wise, the wicked, the simple, or the silent? And I venture to say that in many different situations at one time or another, we've been all of them.
Avadim hayinu lefaro b'mitzrayim. We were slaves and now we are free. Avadim hayinu ata b'nechorin b'nechorin. Avadim hayinu ata b'nechorin. Avadim hayinu ata b'nechorin b'nechorin. Ata b'nechorin b'nechorin. Shalach choshech v'yachshech v'lo maru et divarav. From this Tehillim, from this Psalm of 105, God sent darkness. It was very dark. Did they not defy God's word? God turned their waters into blood and killed their fish. Their land teemed with frogs, even the rooms of their king. Swarms of insects came at God's command. Lice. Okay, now look, I have to break away for a second here. There is a reason why kinim, lice, is a biblical plague. Because if you have lived through lice, and believe me, with all of our medical interventions, we know firsthand about that biblical plague. It is meshuggah. Lice throughout their country, even the word, I just want to itch. God gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. God struck their vines and their fig trees, broke down the trees of their country. Locusts came at God's command. And unfortunately, we've seen it already happen a few months ago in parts of Africa. Grasshoppers without number. They devoured every green thing in the land. They consumed the produce of the soil. God struck down every firstborn in the land, the first fruit of their vigor. Today, we continue to struggle against oppression, and we see more clearly than ever in the way we contribute to that oppression How do we experience slavery and plagues? Are we the generation who will create and share freedom? Tonight, we name 10 ways that more than half of us, in particular women, have not readily achieved freedom from oppression. In this preparation for the ancient plagues, we will also diminish our cups by dipping out drops of wine for each of these plagues. Our cups of happiness. Yes, a cup of Manischewitz is supreme happiness at this time. Our cups of happiness can never be full until we cast out the plagues that threaten injustice against everyone. So I invite you to take your pinky, because we're going to drop a little bit onto our plates, after I recite these, not recognizing women as leaders, scholars, and decision makers who could and should serve as role models for all of us. Not educating young women as seriously as young men. Accepting physical and verbal abuse of women in public, at work, and at home. Excluding women who are single, childless, battered, poor, and disabled from equality and opportunity of basic measures of fairness. Devaluing the home and child care and volunteerism as less than the contributions of a salaried profession. Inequality of employment opportunities at every level. The glass ceiling in all professions and the denial of family needs in work, government, and in public. Stereotyping of women in general, and Jewish women in particular, that forces women to struggle against unfair and unjust expectations. Sacred texts and commentaries that diminish the role of women and contemporary interpretations and teachings that regularly exclude women's voices. Rigid traditional roles from all cultures and from Judaism that divide women and men from collaborating for change and progress. The silence about women's places in history, and particularly in Jewish history. We seek freedom. Frey is Yiddish, actually, so we seek freedom. We seek freedom from these plagues and oppression. We, as a society, have not truly departed Egypt until no one is oppressed.
Sure.
I have memories of this song. I will try not to sing it so everybody can join in and sing it around your own Seder tables. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. As Israel stood by the water's side, let my people go. By God's demand, it did divide. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell all Pharaoh, let my people go.
We continue with 10 plagues from the ancient world. And as we recite each of the plagues, we dip out a drop of wine from our wine cup. When human beings suffer, even evil human beings, our joy cannot be complete. God brought 10 plagues upon the Egyptians, and they were dam, blood, Sfardea, frogs, kinim, lice, arov, beasts, dever, cattle disease, shechin, boils, barad, hail, arbe, locusts, choshech, darkness, and makat bechorot, death of the firstborn.
And now you cannot take your finger and lick off the excess wine because we're not allowed to get any pleasure out of that amount of wine. So make sure you wipe it off on a napkin.
No plague wine.
A quick, brief Miriam song. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. That was written by Debbie Friedman, if you want to look it up. Dayenu. Ilu Hotianu, mi mitraim, Hotianu, mi mitraim, Dayenu. Everybody. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et hashabat, natan lanu et hashabat, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et haTorah, natan lanu et haTorah, dayenu, 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 dayenu.
Excellent. We're going to continue with a little Hallel.
Okay. Hallel. And 2 gold stars for anyone who will come up to any of us and tell us what Hallel means. It does mean praise, by the way. Little Seder humor. Hallel. Therefore, let us rejoice at the miracle of our liberation and sing praises of the God who brought us from slavery to freedom, from despair to joy, from mourning to celebration, from darkness to light, from enslavement to redemption. Let us sing before God a new song, Hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalel. Hallelujah.
And Judy leads us in the second cup of wine or
Second
grape
cup.
juice.
We raise this cup in honor of our history of redemption, and we recite, praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has redeemed us and our ancestors from Egypt, who has brought us to this night when we eat matzah and maror. Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, enable us to celebrate in peace other holy days and festivals, joyful in the rebuilding of your city, Jerusalem, and joyful in your service. We will sing a new song of thanksgiving for our redemption and for our spiritual liberation. Praised are you, Adonai, Redeemer of the people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei pari hagafen Borei pari hagafen. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all the worlds, who creates the fruit of the vine.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Just don't spill.
All right. We are getting to the point where we get to eat. So we do a real hand washing on page 16. And the blessing is recited after we wash our hands. So we're going to give everyone a moment to get up and wash their hands. And then when we come back, we say, having washed our hands, we say in the Torah, only the priests of the temple are commanded to wash, and only before they ate the meal offering. Today, without the temple in Jerusalem, with no altar, no priests, and no ritual offerings, each and every home can be a temple. Every table an altar, every meal a holy gathering, and every Jew a priest. Eating can be transformed into a ritual with meaning. So we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to elevate, to wash our hands. And some of you are probably wondering, when do we eat? Well, we start now with a little bit of matzah. Why do we eat matzah? To remember that even before our ancestors' dough had time to rise, God rescued them. As the Torah teaches, and they baked the dough which they had brought from Egypt into matzah. It did not rise since they hurried out of Egypt, and they could not delay, nor had they prepared other provisions for themselves. Lift the 3 matzot on the matzah plate, recite the blessing, and then distribute the pieces of the top and the middle matzot to everyone on the table. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And then, because we are commanded to eat matzah in particular, we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to eat matzah. Eat from the top and middle matzot while reclining. The longer the Seder, the better the matzah tastes.
Oh, yum, dry matzah.
Mine's good. I have egg.
Why do we eat bitter foods? To remember that the Egyptians, as the Torah teaches, embittered the lives of our ancestors with hard labor in mortar and brick, and in every manner of drudgery in the field, and worked them ruthlessly in all their labor. On Passover, we eat and drink theology and ethics. On our plates, in our cups, with the posture of our bodies, in the gestures of our hands, in the way we eat and drink and sing, in the way we converse with one another, are found the teachings of a people's faith and ethics. The bitter herbs may not be swallowed. They must be chewed and tasted. It is not enough to talk abstractly about oppression, to analyze the causes that led to slavery, to read about the desperate places where humans are forced to live. To the best of our ability, we must experience the lives embittered by oppression. To taste the bitter herbs is part of the process of feeling the affliction of body and spirit from which a subjugated people suffers. Yet, when the maror is eaten, it is mixed with the sweet charoset, perhaps to teach us that memory cannot be immersed only in darkness and despair. The sweet mixture is not the dominant taste as the maror is dipped in the charoset. The charoset is not meant to eradicate the bitter, only to remind us that there is goodness in the world, however small, and hope in the future, however slight. Without the charoset, the only lasting memory would be that of torture and shame. So we mix some of our bitter herbs with the sweet haroset, and we recite the blessing and eat. And as it says here, if it hurts, we've done it correctly. This is our taste of slavery's bitterness. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to eat maror.
Ooh.
Sweet and bitter. Yum.
Ooh.
And finally, to the sage Hillel, eating matzah and maror together was not a trivial matter. First, these represented the Pesach, the Passover offering made to save the firstborn Hebrews in Egypt from death, and offered every spring afterwards in the temple in Jerusalem. Second, to Hillel, slavery and freedom were merged into one historical event. The bread of poverty became the bread of freedom and should be tasted together with the bitter maror, so that one should know the bitterness of slavery and the joy of freedom. In times of freedom, we must not forget the bitterness of slavery. In times of oppression, we must keep alive the hope of freedom. So take from the bottom matzah and put some maror between two pieces of matzah and then eat. We've already blessed it, so we don't need another blessing. And for many people, the most important words of the Seder are right there. Shulchan orech. Let us eat. You have blessed. We will come back to you with another recording for after the meal.